I'm gonna pause the recording. Start over.
Take two.
Thank
Please take
you.
notice that the Wellfleet Conservation Commission, in accordance with Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Wellfleet Environmental Protection Bylaw, and Truro Conservation Commission, in accordance with Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Truro Conservation Bylaw, will hold a joint public hearing via Zoom video conference on Thursday, April 14th, 2022 at 5 p.m. relative to notices of intent filed in each town by the town of Wellfleet and the Cape Cod National Seashore for an ecological restoration limited project to restore native tidal wetland habitat to the large portions of the Herring River floodplain in and adjacent to the seashore by removing man-made tidal restrictions, including removal and replacement of the Chequesset Neck Road dike with a bridge and sluice gates, and reestablishing tidal exchange in the river basin and connected subbasins. So Carol, would you like to do the equivalent? I imagine you have to.
Sure, yes, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I will now open the meeting of the Truro Conservation Commission, 5:04 p.m. Commissioners in attendance, will you please acknowledge by saying aye? Larry Lown?
Aye.
Diane Messenger? I'm sorry, I lost Diane. I think I heard her in there. Let's see, do we have anyone else here? We have a new member that we'd like to welcome, Mark Adams.
I'm here. Hi.
There's Mark. He was just recently sworn in as early as this afternoon, and we welcome him to the Truro Commission. And also Amy Wolf will be joining the commission as well. She just has not been appointed as of yet. And we'll have another commissioner come on just in a little while. With that, this is a joint public hearing with the Town of Wellfleet Conservation Commission. The Truro Conservation Commission holds the following public hearings in accordance with provisions of Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, the Wetlands Protection Act, and the Truro Conservation Bylaw, Chapter 8. The properties that will be involved today in this Herring River project will be in the town of Truro, 133 Old County Road, which is map 59, parcel 66, as well as 125 Old County Road, map 59, parcel 108. And also various federally owned parcels within Cape Cod National Seashore. Thank you.
I should do a roll call on members of the Wellfleet Commission. Michael Fisher.
Yes, Michael Fisher. I should also announce that I'm a trustee of the Wellfleet Conservation Trust, a 501c nonprofit, which is not a business organization. And the Conservation Trust has an interest that will be affected when I perform my official duties with regard to this application. Taking into account the facts I've just disclosed, I feel I can perform my official duties objectively and fairly. And this statement was approved by the Massachusetts State Ethics Commission and the Wellfleet Select Board.
So you're here. Okay, that's great. Barbara?
Yes, I'm here, and I want to disclose that I am a board member of Friends of Herring River. And to avoid any potential perceivement of conflict of interest, I will be recusing for this meeting.
John Kumbler?
Yes, I'm also have a disclosure. I am an abutter to Snake Creek, the area of Snake Creek, which may or may not be in phase 2 of the project, but not in phase 1. But I have disclosed that to the select board.
Okay, let's see. Ben Franklin. Franklin, sorry.
Yes. Hi, yes, here. And I also have to disclose my, the applicant, the Friends of Herring River, sponsoring a project I'm working on through the Palladino Fellowship, but having disclosed that, I feel I can perform my duties objectively and as approved by the Mass Ethics Committee and the Wellfleet Select Board.
Okay, Martin Murphy.
Yes.
Okay, and let's see, who is left?
You.
Me, Leon Shreves. I am here. Yes. I think that's it.
Leon, can we just make one more comment for the minutes? We do happen to have a quorum of the Select Board and the Herring River Executive Council. And I just want that to be shown in the minutes. I don't believe any of them are going to participate as members of their committee except Janet Reinhardt.
Okay, thank you. So today we're not going to be voting on anything tonight. What we're going to do is hear some presentations of the technological content of this hearing, and then we'll entertain questions at the end, and we'll have each Conservation Commission will be discussing it within their own meetings and voting within their own meetings. So just so that's understood, and there's a lot of people here, so we're going to try to keep the comments in the right length and is 2 or 3 minutes if we can. Okay, Hillary, who's the first person who wants to talk? I don't have an agenda with me. So.
We're gonna hear from Jess Wall first, but I'd like to go ahead and mute everyone present. So I'm going to hit the mute all button. If the commission members can go ahead and unmute themselves just for the presentation so that you can speak and be called upon by the chair, that would be great. And then when we get to the end of the meeting, we're just going to request that everyone use the raise hand feature. And if your hand is up, we will get to you. The names all show up in a different order on all the different computers. So Leon, I'm happy to help you out by calling folks as I see the hands go up. So let's just make sure we all stay on mute if we're not called upon to speak. And if the Conservation Commission members can go ahead and unmute themselves, I'm going to go ahead and mute everyone.
Okay, that was impressive. So the first speaker is going to be Hillary.
Hi, good evening, everybody.
Hello.
Everybody can hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent, excellent. My name is Jessica Wall. I'm an attorney at Anderson and Krieger in Boston. I'm joined by George Hall, also of Anderson and Krieger. We represent the Friends of Herring River. We've worked with the Herring River Restoration Project for many years now. We're very excited to bring it to your review tonight. I should say, as an initial thing at the outset, thank you to the commissions and to staff for organizing a joint hearing tonight, which I know takes a little bit of extra time and effort. So we very much appreciate that. I'm joined tonight by Wellfleet Select Board member Janet Reinhardt, Superintendent of the Cape Cod National Seashore, Brian Carlstrom, Project Coordinator Carol Ridley, and also a team of subject matter experts who have put in countless hours of time and expertise to bring the project forward tonight. I will give just a couple of brief remarks at the outset, and then I'll turn it over to Janet. Before we get started, just a little bit of background on project permitting. This project has been extensively studied, and this is actually the last major project permit that we need. There have been many federal and state agencies that have looked at the project already and approved it. We completed NEPA and MEPA review, Army Corps of Engineers review, Cape Cod Commission review, EPA, the Coast Guard, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the State Division of Marine Fisheries, NOAA, many folks. Including DEP Southeast Region, who we've talked to quite a bit about the wetlands impacts for the project. And as you'll hear about more tonight, and was alluded to earlier, the project is an ecological restoration limited project. It's designed to restore an estuary that has been impaired by man-made influences for over 100 years. And because the project is an ERLP, which is an abbreviation, The commission's reviews are slightly different than you might see in a couple of ways. One, because they're ERLPs, the local regulations provide that the state ERLP regulations and performance standards are what apply here. So it's really the state act that's doing a lot of the work. And then the second piece is that the performance standards are slightly different than what you might see in a normal project. The commissions are asked to look at the level of impairment and degradation in the estuary, the magnitude of project benefits, and then the usual factors that you see about avoidance and mitigation. But they do allow for the temporary or permanent loss or conversion of wetland resources, all in favor of the sort of overall purpose of the project. So the paramount goal is the restoration of the wetlands in the estuary overall. So you'll see our NOI has lots of information in there for you to review at various levels of detail. Tonight, our goal is to give an overview, and then we're happy to answer any follow-up questions that you may have. We believe the project has dramatic benefits for the estuaries and for the towns, and we're excited to tell you more. So with that note, I will pass it to Janet.
Yes, good. Thank you, Jess. And it's an honor to be here. This is one of my favorite things in the world is the Herring River project. And I can think back to 25 years ago when John Portnoy organized his friends to come and clear the pathways and the waterways and cut some branches. And we all would look at the river with, I guess, sadness and certainly concern that it needed help. And I know this has been a lot of hard work by a lot of people, and we're getting closer all the time. And with that, I just want everyone to think about what it means to restore a river. It's a metaphor that we can all use all the time in life, and this is just very important. It's important to all of Wellfleet and the environment. This is the largest tidal restoration project in the Northeast. It represents a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to address aging infrastructure and at the same time, and at the same time reclaim the vast benefits to the local environment and economy that comes from a healthy estuary. Not only will it revitalize the Herring River, but also Wellfleet Harbor, Cape Cod Bay, and even eventually the Gulf of Maine. The Herring River was a healthy estuary at the center of life in Wellfleet. That all began to change in 1909 when the dike was installed at Chequesset Neck Road. Within decades, water quality began to degrade, and previously extensive salt marsh was reduced to 10% of its prior footprint. This resulted in tremendous loss of habitat and food sources for fish, shellfish, mammals, birds, invertebrates, and plant life. The replacement of the dike, which is sorely needed, will increase the flow of water and sediment above and below the dike. This will improve the quality of the ecosystem, flushing out toxins, decreasing bacteria and fecal coliform count, increasing sediment transport, reestablishing healthy peat, and more, which other speakers will go into. Wellfleet is a fishing and shellfishing town. Deteriorated water quality caused by the dike has led to closure of once productive shellfish beds and now poses a threat to downstream grant areas. From a climate change perspective, the marsh will provide better protection against sea level rise and storm tide pathway surges. This project has been shaped by more than 2 decades of careful study and collaboration. The town has been working diligently with the seashore and other state, federal, and local partners to develop a plan to reclaim this lost resource. We engaged technical experts, worked with property owners, and listened to a wide range of stakeholders. Out of that effort grew a restoration plan that is based on the best available science and has broad-based support. It has been vetted through state and federal environmental reviews and has strong regional and local support. Thank you for consideration of this notice of intent. We believe it makes a strong case that the Herring River Restoration Project will protect and advance wetland resources and interests identified in the Wetland Protections Act and local regulations. I'm so impressed with the National Seashore, Ridley Associates, and Friends of the Herring River, and our own naturalists and environmentalists who have worked so hard continuously and diligently on this project. The natural balance will be restored. It will be a huge benefit. I look forward to the day when we can all look out at the river and enjoy its beauty. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Hillary?
I think Brian is up next, Brian Carlstrom.
Correct.
And here I am. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be before both conservation commissions for Wellfleet and Truro. And it's remarkable that we're here this evening as a result of the collaborative effort that we've been undertaking across 3 departments of the federal government, state of Massachusetts, 2 towns, and all collaboration coordinated through Friends of Herring River with many other nonprofits and numerous stakeholders within the community has gotten us to this point, and it's a milestone event to be at this juncture in the process. So thanks to all those that have worked on this thus far and will continue working on this until the project is complete with the infrastructure that's going to be improved in the very near future. To get into the technical aspects of this, the portions of the Herring River are classified right now as impaired by Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection under Section 303 of the Clean Water Act, because pollutants from the river are entering Wellfleet Harbor. And this project is expected to improve the water quality significantly. And that's a significant, huge deal for the National Park Service, because it's within the enabling legislation for the entire agency to preserve resources unimpaired. And this is exactly the opposite of that by statute. And we want to see that resolved. And this is our best opportunity to do so. According to the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act regulations, the project can be permitted as an ELRP because we are proposing to implement tidal restoration to further the interests of the act. We're improving things through this, which include fish, wildlife, and shellfish habitat, storm and flood protection, and prevention of pollution. In the phase 1 improvements, some of the specifics include 570 acres of highly productive intertidal coastal wetland habitat, 11 miles of stream habitat for herring, eels, and other fish, and 200 acres of harvestable shellfish habitat, and potential for carbon sequestration to contribute towards climate change, towards combating climate change. And the project has completed a habitat management plan, which has been approved by the Massachusetts Department of Fisheries and Wildlife, Natural Heritage, and Endangered Species Program. And the project aim is to restore tidal flow that will not significantly increase flooding or storm damage impacts to the built environment. All low-lying structures and roads that could be impacted by tidal flow are going to be protected. Plans and landowner approvals are part of the permit package. And the tidal restoration of the Herring River will be guided through a comprehensive adaptive management process, guided by intense scientific monitoring to support decisions about managing tide gates and other aspects of the project. This is the largest estuary project happening in the Northeast, and it is also the most studied and will continue to be so. Back over to, I think my remarks are done. I'm not sure who's next or where it goes. Carol, maybe?
Next, we have Carol Ridley.
Thank you, Jessica.
Great, thank you everyone, and good afternoon. And my name is Carol Ridley, project coordinator. If I may, chairs, I'd like to share my screen to share with you a few PowerPoint slides.
Okay.
Sure.
All right, how's that? Can everyone see the slides at this point?
Just
All right, great. So the purpose of this part of the presentation is to walk through an overview of the project, give you a sense of the project in total, and also to review some of the specific provisions and how the notice of intent demonstrates compliance with the provisions for an ecological restoration limited project. And just as a start, and I think you've heard it eloquently stated by the prior speakers, this truly is a generational opportunity to restore a resource area that's been severely degraded over time and really restore its resource functions and its role as an economic engine to the local communities and the Outer Cape. This notice of intent, I think, is obviously, but I want to state for the record, has been jointly submitted by the town of Wellfleet and Cape Cod National Seashore. And the partnership that Brian spoke about a moment ago is really central to the success of this project and bringing us to this evening. So this array of logos of state and federal agencies represents the extensive commitment of these agencies to the success of this project over many, many years. So the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, NOAA Restoration Center, the Massachusetts Division of Ecological Restoration, and of course, the Friends of Herring River. All of these folks are part of the technical team contributing to the project. Some of these organizations, particularly NOAA and Massachusetts Division of Ecological Restoration, have already contributed significant resources to support the permitting and design and studies that have been done to date. So truly a significant and in some ways historic partnership and collaboration. And it's also important to note that there is very, very strong support for this project throughout the community, throughout the region, throughout the state, and even nationally. This is just a listing of some of the organizations that have gone on record in support of the project. I believe that there is quite a large record of statements and letters that have been submitted for the hearing today, and I think we're going to hear more about those later on in the meeting. But really strong, terrific support. And I think that's really an outgrowth of the commitment that the seashore and the town has made to outreach in the community and making sure that stakeholders are engaged and listened to throughout this process. And another reason we believe why there is such strong support for this project is essentially just appreciation and agreement with the restoration objectives that we are seeking to achieve. So overall, the objective of this project is to restore nearly 1,000 acres of once productive salt marsh. And as has been mentioned, this is one of the largest tidal restoration projects in the Northeast of the United States. And this project also seeks to address more than a decade of degradation that has been caused primarily by prolonged tidal restriction. And this project, the NOI that you are reviewing, seeks to implement phase 1 of that restoration project, which would restore 570 acres within that larger tidal system. And most of that, approximately 540 acres, is federally owned within the Cape Cod National Seashore. So those are essentially our restoration objectives. And in this process, we will be restoring and responding to quite severe degradation. And I just want to walk you through some of the parameters of that. I think Brian alluded to the water quality issues that will be addressed by this project. Certainly, Herring River is currently an impaired water under the Federal Clean Water Act, and the dike is designated by the state as a point source for bacterial contamination. And this designation as a point source for contamination has led to the closure of downstream shellfish beds that at one time were productive wild shell fishery. And we have some science that suggests that the prolonging of that condition could exacerbate conditions further and potentially threaten grant areas that are in the Wellfleet Harbor area if this condition were to persist. Another facet of the degradation that we'll be addressing with this project is to restore the salt marsh that was lost due to tidal restriction. So this figure shows you the extent, as outlined in green and with that tannish sort of coloration, the extent of the salt marsh prior to the installation of the Chequesset Neck Road dike. That was roughly 1,000 acres, and that little black shape toward the dike down here at the base of the figure is the small amount that remains today, 10% or less of that original amount of salt marsh. So as a result of that tidal restriction, some additional ditching that's happened, the marsh peat has deteriorated and subsided up to 3 feet in much of this area. That has led to decomposition of the marsh peat, the release of acids that have contributed to acid sulfate soils in much of this area. So we have lost that habitat. We have a subsided marsh plain that is not resilient to climate effects or storms or flooding. We also have lost what we now understand to be significant carbon storage potential from salt marsh and other tidal wetlands that have been replaced with ponded freshwater wetlands that actually emit methane. So not only have we lost that carbon sequestration benefit, we've created an environment that emits a very potent heat trapping gas. So sort of a double hit to climate effects. And of course, we've had a proliferation of Phragmites and other forms of non-native vegetation that have displaced the native salt marsh grasses. So as has been alluded to, a lot of lost habitat. The tidal restrictions, of course, always also restrict the passage of fish, migratory fish. I mentioned the closure of shellfish beds. And when you think about what an estuary is, which is what Herring River originally was, it's a nursery area, it's a food source for the outer ocean areas. So in this case, Herring River operated as an estuary, feeding and serving as a nursery that contributed to the Gulf of Maine food chain. So that function has been all but lost due to the tidal restriction. And so we would hope to restore that by restoring the natural functions of the estuary. And of course, regain the habitat for fish, for shellfish, for birds, and other species that rely on salt marsh habitat. So the project itself is fairly straightforward in that what we're seeking to do is to remove restrictions that currently prevent tidal flow and to restore that tidal flow in increments over time, to monitor what happens in the system as that tidal flow returns. And as you'll learn as we go through the project in more detail, you'll see how carefully and conservatively the project's been designed and how the implementation strategy is to continue that conservative approach. At any point in time, the tidal flow can be slowed and can be stopped. So there is a lot of belt and suspenders built into this plan. And this photo, though, shows you a little bit, it's a little close-up view to the current tide gate situation at the dike. And it's worth noting that only one of those tide gates is currently allowing water up into Herring River. So a very, very restricted tidal situation. The main water control features, there are 4 of them shown here on this figure. And if you can see my cursor, I'm locating the Chequesset Neck Road dike, which would be a portion of that dike would be removed, and a bridge and sluice gate structure would be constructed to replace the dike. This pink dot is actually, it's a different color because it's actually on federally owned property. It's the Mill Creek, it's right at the entrance to the Mill Creek subbasin, and it will be a a water control structure with a sluice gate. Right here, sort of in the middle of the figure, is the causeway that crosses, it's a portion of High Toss Road that crosses the marsh. So it's where High Toss Road and Way 672 converge right about here. This is right about where Way 672 is. And of course, so that portion of the causeway would be removed and a natural channel would be restored to allow tidal flow from the lower portion of Herring River up into the upper portion. And this dot here on the right side is the entrance to the Pole Dyke subbasin. And here again, there would be a water control structure with sluice gate. Now in phase 1, this particular structure would be configured to only allow drainage out of the system. It would not allow any tidal flow into Pole Dyke Creek. And the reason for that is that there are still a few issues to be worked out with some of the property owners in that subbasin. So that would be considered a later phase of restoration, assuming those issues are resolved. But one thing to note is that that structure will enlarge the opening and allow much better drainage out of the system during phase 1 restoration, even though tidal flow will not be allowed into that part of the system. So those are the main water control features that are constructed as part of phase 1. However, they're the main water control features that are needed for the subsequent phases of restoration as well. So essentially phase 1 would result in the construction of all of the main water control infrastructure needed for full restoration, but we are seeking permitting only for phase 1 to restore 570 acres. And I think we had a great site visit today with many members of both commissions. We visited this site, which is the Trequesset Neck Road Dike that was built in 1909 and repaired in the 1970s. I think we have another photo here that puts this into some context. So the red marks show you sort of the original opening before the dike was created in 1909. And now we have 3 culverts that combined total about 18 feet, which really overstates the opening because, as I mentioned before, only one of those culverts is allowing water into Herring River on a flood tide. And then it's, and the tide gates are not in great working order. They're rusted in certain ways, in certain positions, and aren't functioning as they should. So there is restriction certainly on the inflow, although there's some leakage of the flaps on the other bays, but a very, very restricted flood tide situation currently. This photo is an image or rendering of what is proposed to be the new bridge installed in replace of that portion of dike that would be removed. It would be 165 feet wide, and it would include 9 adjustable sluice gates and 8 removable panels. There are also some public access features. There's going to be an ADA accessible walking area from a parking area down to the water. There's going to be a kayak portage on both sides of the structure so that there'll be safe portage for kayakers to get from one side to the other, and viewing platforms. So it's a much enhanced public asset for viewing and enjoying the water resource, as well as providing the much needed tidal flow. This slide just gives you an idea of when we use the term sluice gate, what do we mean? So these are just examples from other projects to give you a sense of what we're talking about in terms of slide gates in this case. And we have a combination of slide gates and slide flap gates. So a variety of different types of gates are built into the project design. So this figure gives you a good overview of the project site area, which is the entire phase 1 restoration area. You've heard the term 570 acres several times this evening already. So let me just orient you first. So here we are, down here at the bottom is where currently is where the Trequesset Neck Road Dike is. Here's Mill Creek. The Trequesset Yacht and Country Club is right in this area. Here's the High Toss area and the Pole Dyke subbasin here. So in phase one, this blue area represents the extent of tidal influence at the end of phase one. So this isn't going to be day one of phase one. This would be the end of phase one. And that is a total of 570 acres. This is all area that is within wetlands jurisdiction currently. As you can see, because this green, dark green line in the green shaded area is Cape Cod National Seashore. So as you can see very easily looking at this figure, most of the restoration area is within Cape Cod National Seashore, and that would be 540 acres or 95%. There is some of this area, some of this 570 acres is privately owned land. Some of it is owned, 10 acres is owned by approximately by the Wellfleet Conservation Trust, and approximately 10 acres by the Chequesset Yacht and Country Club. And then there's another 10 or 11 acres that is made up of portions of parcels that are existing jurisdictional wetlands that will experience tidal influence. So there could be changes in vegetation on those properties. So all these property owners are aware of this potential impact on their property. And we've been working very closely, as you'll hear more, with the club and with the trust throughout this process. I would note that the entire Herring River floodplain, or the historic area here is, which is outlined in this reddish color. This is all within the Wellfleet Harbor area of critical environmental concern and is considered an outstanding resource water. Now, one of the requirements that an ecological restoration limited project must meet is to ensure that it protects the built environment. And the project has worked extensively with property owners, first to understand where there may be potential threats to structures which constitute the built environment. So extensive analysis, hydrological modeling, and other surveys and other engineering work has been undertaken to first identify that universe of where impacts could occur. And once those were identified, extensive work was done in concert with property owners to design appropriate mitigation to ensure that any public or private structure is protected from any potential impact of tidal flow as a result of the restoration project. So the mitigation or protection of the built environment that's built into this project includes the elevation of approximately 2 miles in total of low-lying road segments and replacing culverts with larger culverts that will increase tidal flow, elevating portions of the Chequesset Yacht and Country Club. There are 5 low-lying holes that were constructed right on the marsh surface that would be affected by tidal flow, and those would be elevated as a result of the project. And then there are 3 other private properties that will have some mitigation measures installed on their property to protect structures. In all cases, whether it's the roads or work on private property, the mitigation measures that have been proposed and will be installed before any tidal flow affects them are designed and will be capable of protecting those properties under full restoration conditions, not just phase 1. So we're looking at the long view here, anticipating that subsequent phases of restoration will be pursued and permitted. So those full restoration impacts will be are factored into the design of those mitigation measures. So they are fully protected for the full restoration. Now, I think you heard mention earlier of the Herring River Executive Council, which is the body that was formed by the town of Wellfleet and the Cape Cod National Seashore to provide oversight of the Herring River Restoration Project. And that will ensure that ongoing, as this restoration is incrementally implemented, that there's local governance and decision-making. You also heard mention of the adaptive management plan, which is going to make sure that we are listening to science, that we're carefully monitoring system responses to the restoration of tidal flow and making decisions based on that science, which will get better and better as restoration proceeds and we get real data from the effects of tidal restoration in the system. And the Herring River Executive Council, as the governing body, is responsible for the tide gate management policy. So making decisions about how those gates will be opened and managed. And so we're going to talk a little bit about these items right now. So again, the Executive Council is the oversight entity, makes decisions about adaptive management and tide gate management policies, and ensures compliance with regulatory permits. They will make decisions about how certain things will be managed, whether trained personnel from the seashore or the town or consultants will undertake monitoring or implementation actions that are needed for the project. In addition, we have other forms of oversight and advice to or input to the Executive Council that's noteworthy. The NEPA certificate established or called for the creation of a regulatory oversight group that consists of all of the state, federal, local, county agencies that are part of the permitting process for this project. So that's a group that will continue to exist, that will receive information about the project, that will advise and provide input on decisions about adaptive management and tide gate management on into the future. So that's another sort of layer of technical expertise that is embedded in the implementation process. There's also the technical team, and I mentioned earlier the representatives of those various state, federal agencies that have been our partners all along. Those folks continue to play a role, an advisory input role within their positions of their agencies. There's also the Herring River Stakeholder Group, which the Executive Council formed. That's a 19-member group that represents a broad array of stakeholder interests in Truro and Wellfleet. And that group will continue to get information and provide advisory input. And of course, all of that monitoring and data analysis will constantly be feeding into the decision-making process. And I think we're maybe all pretty familiar with the concept of adaptive management, but it's really a foundational concept in this project, in that initially a lot of data collection was undertaken and modeling was undertaken to predict outcomes of how the system would respond to the restoration of tidal flow. That monitoring will continue, and that data collection will be continuous, and it will feed into additional modeling that will be refined by the fact that we're having sort of real-time data from actual conditions in the system. The adaptive management plan, which is part of the submission to the commissions, is structured around 5 key restoration goals, which are here: restoring hydrography, restoring ecological function and integrity, minimizing adverse impacts, maximizing ecosystem services, and minimizing cost. So for each of those colored boxes with those restoration objectives, there's a very detailed, robust set of sub-objectives, and for each of those specific items or data points that will be measured to reach predicted outcomes that will indicate success or less than success and the need for adjustment. So it's a very, very rigorous, structured decision-making process that is, again, based on science, that improves over time as more data is collected, as restoration is implemented. And this is just a sampling of the different types of parameters that are currently or have been and continue to be monitored throughout the system. So it's a very sophisticated, really cutting edge in many ways, adaptive management, ecological monitoring program. I mentioned that the Herring River Executive Council is responsible for making decisions about tide gate management, and they have already, based on the adaptive management plan and the science generated from that, which factored in not only the modeling and all the data collection, but also an elicitation process that brought in experts from across the country to look at the information and provide additional feedback. There was also a community survey that went far and wide into the community to get input on various public views about a wide range of factors. All of that went into a decision support tool that was helpful to the Executive Council in narrowing the choice of options for moving forward with an initial tide gate management policy. And so I think it was last summer, the Executive Council made a decision to adopt an initial policy that will cover the first 3 years of tide gate restoration, tidal restoration. So just very quickly, starting in the first 2 months, the tide gates would basically be set at existing conditions. That's just to get things up and running and check systems and make sure all the mechanical functions are working and so forth. We're not going to throw the gates open on day one. Right around the 3rd month and through the end of the first year, there would be progressive openings of those tide gates that would reach up to 1.8 feet in the lower Herring River. That's mean high water. That would be at the end of the first year. And that's an important threshold because at that point, water starts to just overtop the stream creek beds and reach the marshes. So it's a fairly low level in terms of the phase 1 objectives, but it is enough tidal flow to begin to support changes on the marsh plain so we can begin to see what restoration might happen. And during this time, we have the opportunity to do some additional vegetation management to remove vegetation that might be killed by salt or to make room for the colonization of the more desirable natural vegetation that restoration will lead to. And of course, monitoring continues after the initiation of tidal restoration. So that's all in that first year. Again, a slow start up to that 1.8 feet in the lower river. And then in years 2 and 3, essentially that 1.8 level is maintained. So no further increases over the next 2 years to give us time to really begin to collect data and understand what the implications of this new introduction of tidal flow are throughout the system, and continued vegetation management, perhaps do some pilot projects with marsh elevation, removing some of the spoil berms, and exploring different ways to enhance the accumulation of sediment that will allow the marsh plain to begin to regrow or regain height during that 2-year period in years 2 and 3 of this initial 3-year tide gate period. And the features of this are, of course, with this continuous monitoring, we're going to be generating data that will feed back into the models and help us understand what the next set of decisions could be and inform the Executive Council in their decision-making on tide gate management policy. So there's a lot of flexibility here to adjust the tide gates as needed. So it's a very conservative approach, and it gives us a really good foundation of understanding about how the science, how about the systems responding to tidal flow to inform longer-term management decisions. So that's the initial policy that the Executive Council has adopted for the first 3 years post-construction, once the tide gates start to open up at the Chequesset Dike or bridge, excuse me. So at this point, we've shared, I think, a pretty thorough overview of the project, the degradation we seek to address, the project components, the adaptive management that's going to guide decision-making, and the initial tide gate management policy that the Executive Council has adopted to guide us in that initial period of restoration. What I'd like to do in the next few slides is talk a little bit about the your matters, which is compliance with the applicable provisions for an ecological restoration limited project. I think Jess very thoroughly reviewed the fact that this project has already had quite a bit of regulatory review, quite thorough regulatory review, dating back to 2016, where the MEPA certificate and the Federal Record of Decision were issued, which sort of concluded the environmental impact process, which had begun several years before that. So that was a rather extensive process that looked at all of the various issues associated, ecological and socioeconomic issues associated with restoring Herring River. As an ecological restoration limited project, proceeding from that point, we had sort of a specific pathway we needed to follow in terms of the sequence of different permits we needed to obtain in order to be eligible to get the next one. And so our very first permit was back in 2020, when we went before the Cape Cod Commission for Development of Regional Impact Review. And that was issued in the summer of 2020. And then from there, our next step, which is a little bit out of the normal sequence, I think, that you're used to seeing, but as an ecological restoration limited project, we were required to get our water quality certification from Massachusetts DEP, and also to seek approval under Section 404 of the Clean Water Act from U.S. Army Corps. So we did receive our water quality certification in 2021, last fall. We also, right around the same time, the Corps issued approval under a general permit. So we have our 401 and 404 approvals issued from DEP and Army Corps respectively. Now, we also are required to obtain licenses from Mass DEP for Chapter 91 waterways. Those may not be issued by DEP until we complete this process. However, in consultation with DEP, we filed for those licenses at the same time as we filed for 401 approval. And so that we've already gone through the public comment period, and I believe DEP has completed its review of all the information, and they're waiting to see how this process unfolds. But we're well through that process, even though those licenses are still pending, because we need to have our orders of condition for those licenses to be issued. So that brings us to this step, which is our filing of notices of intent concurrently to the to both commissions, to each commission. I would note, just late last week, we were notified by Mass DEP that they have issued file numbers. So they have gone through our packages as were submitted to you and found them compliant with all the requirements for submission. So just to note that. So what is an ecological restoration project or an ecological restoration limited project? As defined in the wetland protection regulations, the primary purpose, as we are describing it here, is to restore an impaired system that's been degraded due to anthropogenic influences. So as we have described, we have a former very productive estuarine salt marsh system that has deteriorated significantly in significant ways. The wetland resources and the interests they support have degraded along with that time of tidal restriction. And so we're seeking to restore that. As an ecological restoration limited project, such a project is allowed to, or you are allowed to permit such a project that results in a loss or conversion of wetland resources to the minimum necessary to achieve the restoration goals. So we'll be talking a little bit about how this project seeks to restore 570 acres of native tidal wetlands. There will be some conversion of wetland resources and some impacts to wetland resources that are far outweighed by that vast restoration benefit. And that's really the purpose of an ecological restoration limited project. Now, there are some further provisions beyond those essential definitions. In the regulations, the state regulations, there are provisions that apply to coastal ecological restoration limited projects and inland ecological restoration limited projects. And so the definition of an ecological restoration limited project is one that meets the requirements of either coastal or inland. In this case, we are required to meet both, and we can demonstrate that we meet both requirements for a coastal ecological restoration project and a limited ecological, inland ecological restoration limited project. As Jess mentioned, and I'll just reinforce this a little bit. So the requirement is to meet those provisions, and the regulations specify that you may issue an order of conditions, even though the provisions that contain the resource area performance standards, notwithstanding those requirements. So those requirements are not what dictate the review and approval of an ecological restoration limited project. It is the other provisions that are identified in the regulations specific to coastal or inland ecological restoration limited projects. So this is a different pathway that focuses on the ecological restoration limited project provisions and not the standard resource area performance standards that are generally applied to most projects that would come before you. And in your local regulations, and fortunately, Wellfleet and Truro have very comparable local regulations when it comes to ecological restoration limited projects. And essentially, both commissions understand that if you find that a project meets the definition of 310 CMR 10.04, which is the state definition, which is also in your regulations, that a project complies with either coastal or inland ecological restoration limited projects, then you will view that and review that project based on the state regulations and not the provisions of your local regulations. So you make the determination, yes, this is an ecological restoration limited project, then the review that you undertake is based on state regulations and not local regulations and performance standards. So our job is to demonstrate compliance as a coastal and inland ecological restoration limited project. And we believe that our notice of intent demonstrates that. It meets all of the requirements that are necessary prior to submitting an ecological restoration limited project notice of intent. It contains all of the information that is specified in the regulations that must be contained in a notice of intent, and it meets the requirements of coastal and inland. All of those provisions, and we'll go through those very briefly. And within those provisions, there are identified some specific factors that the issuing authority, in this case you, must consider in your deliberation of approval of an ecological restoration limited project, and we will demonstrate compliance with those factors, or a strong response to those factors that you must consider. So just quickly, and I don't need to spend a lot of time on each of these bullets, but there are specified in the regulations a number of specific things that must happen before a notice of intent for an ecological restoration limited project can be submitted, and we have checked all of those boxes. Whether it's the notice in the environmental monitor, securing our water quality certification, we have completed the MISA review, and you have in your packets a determination letter from Natural Heritage, which indicates that their opinion is that the project meets the performance standards for issuance of an order of conditions, and has approved a habitat management plan for MISA exempt portions of the project. And it also identifies conditions for non-exempt portions. So our job is to comply with those conditions, but inherent in that determination is approval, as long as we abide by those conditions. Similarly, with Division of Marine Fisheries and Division of Fish and Wildlife, DFW has waived time of year restrictions. That correspondence is in the notice of intent. Division of Marine Fisheries, in fact, just today was, I believe Emily and Hillary received another letter, a comment letter on the notice of intent from the Division of Marine Fisheries, which reasserts that this project isn't within an area where time of year restrictions applies. They acknowledge that in some cases, there may be a need to coordinate with Division of Marine Fisheries if activities can't precisely line up with those time of year restrictions, but they are basically indicating that this project is consistent with their requirements for time of year restrictions, and there may be need for some coordination in the future, and that the design and operations plan is compatible with fish passage requirements. So those are among the pre-submission requirements that we were able to accomplish. And then as far as all of the information that is required to submit in the notice of intent, all of that is contained within the package that was submitted to each commission. Many of the same things that we just talked about are included on that list, and I'm happy to go back over that if you wish. But I'd like to just talk a little bit about the specific coastal and specific inland provisions that I referred to a number of times a minute ago. So the first thing is, and you're going to see they're very compatible. They're very parallel in their structure. But a project of this type that has both coastal and inland wetland impacts needs to respond to both. So we need to demonstrate compliance with both sets of provisions within the regulation. And the first is to determine what type of ecological restoration limited project this is. And there are several different categories. This is a tidal restoration project type. It meets that requirement by demonstrating that it will not significantly impact any the built environment through flooding or storm damage. So as we described earlier, we've done some very extensive work with private property owners and in terms of public infrastructure to make sure that the protection of the built environment is ensured by the mitigation measures incorporated in the plan. So that has been accomplished. This project does further the interests of the Wetland Protection Act in several important ways: flood control, storm damage prevention, pollution prevention, protection of land containing shellfish, fisheries, and wildlife habitat. In terms of stream crossing standards, so in some cases we have tidal crossings that are restricted, and the restoration project through the enlargement of culverts and removal of restrictions will remove those restrictions to the maximum extent practicable, while minimizing any ancillary impacts on resource areas in the process of doing that. In some cases, we have stream crossings that are not tidal at the moment because they're artificially restricted. And so we will be reintroducing tidal flow, creating larger stream crossings, and allowing that tidal flow to be restored. We also have operation and maintenance plans that ensure that all of the infrastructure that is designed as part of this project will continue to function as proposed into the future. And those plans are incorporated into the filing. They are currently draft plans and will be finalized once our final design plans are completed. The provisions for the Inland Ecological Restoration Limited Project are very similar. Again, there's a need to identify the type of Inland Ecological Restoration Limited Project, in this case, again, tidal, because it restores tidal flow and will not significantly increase flooding or storm damage to the built environment, again, through our carefully planned mitigation. Again, furthering the interests of the Wetland Protection Act and addressing the stream crossing standards and providing the operation and maintenance plans. So very, very similar provisions for coastal and inland, but again, we are required to meet both. And then I mentioned that there were some considerations built into these provisions that the Commission is to consider in making its determination. And these are the extent of severe degradation anthropogenically created, the magnitude and significance of impacts in improving the affected resources and the interest sustained by the Act, and essentially the magnitude of impacts and the ability to avoid those impacts to the maximum extent possible, and avoid or minimize impacts to resource areas. So the first of these, the severe degradation, we reviewed earlier in this presentation, so I'm not going to go through that again. I think we've heard that. But I do want to focus a little bit on these next two considerations that are part of your review. So just in terms of the magnitude and significance of impacts, we've talked about the 570 acres of restored tidal wetland, all the improvements to water quality that are necessary for healthy habitat, whether it's for shellfish or any other form of birds or aquatic life or terrestrial life that relies on the salt marsh habitat. Reconnecting to the Gulf of Maine and that, estuarine function becoming part of the life of the river again, and restoring the natural food web that supports a wide variety of wildlife. Reopening of the fisheries, fish migration, spawning habitat. I think the 11 acres of riverine fish habitat that Brian mentioned earlier is part of that. removing the impediments to migration. Restoring water quality will allow us to restore those closed shellfish beds over time, we believe, to make those once again open for wild harvest, and restoring that natural marsh function of trapping sediment and gaining elevation and allowing that marsh to once again resume its normal plane and be a functioning, resilient marsh again. And then restoring the habitats, we talked about, in addition to the sort of storm and flood resilience, also that carbon storage potential and eliminating those methane emissions from ponded wetlands. So a huge contribution to climate, to improving climate issues. Restoring fish that are predators of mosquito larvae, that will help control or reduce habitat for nuisance mosquitoes and control that to some extent. Also, improvements to water quality will eliminate habitat for nuisance mosquitoes. So we believe that will be an important benefit to this project, and reestablishing natural vegetated buffers. So many significant benefits to restoring this important area. And just again, to put this sort of regulatory view in context, the Ecological Restoration Limited Project, provides this opportunity for balance. There are restoration objectives that are designed to address degradation, severe degradation, and they allow some resource impact or conversion in order to achieve that greater goal. So for Herring River, we have this 570 acres of restored salt marsh and all of the wetland resource benefits and interests that are associated with those healthy, functioning tidal wetlands. There will be some temporary and permanent impacts as a result of that restoration effort, but those are and can be permitted as part of this Ecological Restoration Limited Project. And so in your notices of intent, we have presented these impacts, both permanent and temporary, by resource area, both for Wellfleet and for Truro. There's another table here for Truro, for the small amount of area that would be impacted in Truro. And I just want to make sure we're all seeing the same thing when we look at these. I want to make it clear that it would not be appropriate to tally these columns. There is a great deal of overlap between these categories of wetland resources. So for example, land subject to coastal storm flowage would encompass most of these resource categories. So I just want to make clear, we thought it was important to represent impacts to all of the categories of resources that may be of interest to the commission. But I just want to make sure that this isn't viewed as something that's cumulative. And that would be same for the impacts in Truro. So weighing the scale, the impacts associated with the construction activities are represented on these tables and are far outweighed by the restoration of 570 acres of native tidal wetlands. So just to summarize a very long presentation, we hope that we have demonstrated to you that we have a notice of intent that seeks restoration objectives to address severe degradation that has been caused by anthropogenic tidal restriction. We are pursuing this project through a regulatory pathway that allows us to achieve those restoration goals, recognizing that there may be some impacts to resource areas or conversion of wetland resource areas from one type to another. This is a different pathway than you are normally used to reviewing projects that have certain other performance standards, but our job is to demonstrate compliance with the Coastal and Inland Ecological Restoration Limited Project provisions. And we believe we've made a very strong case in doing so, and have also demonstrated evidence that supports approval based on the factors that your guidance is to review. So the extent of degradation, the magnitude and significance of benefits that will result from achieving our restoration goal, and the extensive work that's been done to design a project to achieve those restoration objectives in a manner that really minimizes any adverse impacts to resource areas. So with that, I thank you for your patience, and we'll be happy to take any questions from the commission. Or Jess, did you want to say anything in closing?
No, Carol, I think that you've done a wonderful job covering all of it. There's a lot to consider and a lot of detail, but I think a pretty clear big picture that you brought forward. So with that, you know, our project team is available to answer any questions that the chairs see fit.
So if you have a question, down at the bottom of your screen, there's the reactions area. And
Leon,
you can raise a hand from there.
while folks are organizing their thoughts and raising their hands, I'd like to just run through the letters that we have received. We have received a number of letters. They were all sent to the Wellfleet Conservation Commission to review before the hearing, except for the few that came in later today. So what I'd like to do is just read through who sent in letters of support for the project. And if Leon or members of the commission would like any of these letters read into the record, I'm happy to do so. But I don't think it's possible for me to read them all today. I will have them all in a PDF if anyone in the audience is interested in receiving copies of them as well. I'm happy to email them out. So that being said, we have received a letter from Bill Bowenga. We have received a letter from Chris Algiers with support from the dredging task force in the town of Wellfleet. We have received a letter from John and Linda Reel. We have received a letter from Mary Fox. Chris Durbin and Portia Durbin from Chequesset Neck Road. Alan Shapiro and Emily Greenspan of Quail Run. We've received a letter from the trustee and board member of the Friends of Herring River, David Kuntz Jr., and trustee from the Wellfleet Conservation Trust. We've received a letter from Ducks Unlimited, John Portnoy. We've received a letter from Myra and Walter Durrell of Somerset Ave. Another one from Jacqueline Faust at 960 Chequesset Neck Road. We received a letter from Jeffrey Stefani, proprietor of the Colony of Wellfleet. Daniel Hayden of Restore America's Estuaries. Denny O'Connell from the Wellfleet Conservation Trust. Mark Robinson, Executive Director of the Compact of Cape Cod Conservation Trusts. We received a letter from Gail Ferguson, 130 West Main Street. John Cornblue. And I don't have his address. We received a letter from the Cape Cod Salties Sport Fishing Club from Jack Creighton. Peter Eisenbarth, the president of the Friends of the Cape Cod National Seashore. Katie and Dennis O'Brien, former finance committee members of the Friends of Herring River and year-round Truro residents. We received a letter from the Nature Conservancy, signed by Allison Bowden. We received a letter from Tatiana Fredrickson Miller and Carl Fredrickson, co-owners of 695 Boundbrook Island Road. We have a letter from the Wellfleet Harbor Master. We have a letter from Cara Palladino. We have a letter from the Wellfleet Shellfish Department, signed by Nancy Chavetta. We received a letter from Margot Fenn. We received a letter from Timothy Leonard from, oh wait, hold on. Yep, Timothy Leonard from the National Parks Conservation Association. We received a letter from Will Sullivan, the Wellfleet Harbor Master. That's a duplicate. And that's a duplicate. We received a letter from Carl Palladino, son of Don Palladino, founding member and past president of the Friends of Herring River. We received a letter from Myra Rabin and Thomas Whitman. They're fortunate to own property in both Truro and Wellfleet. We have a letter from Mark Rowe. And he resides on Chequesset Neck Road. We have a letter from Lynn Southey. She lives in South Wellfleet. We have another letter from Edward Fontenot and Christopher Belanchi. Sorry if I butchered your names. Those are pretty tricky. They come from Wiley Cottage in Truro. We have another letter from Gordon Peabody, past chair of the Herring River Technical Committee from North Truro. We have a letter from Martha Craig, executive director of the Friends of Herring River. A letter from Dr. Sarah Oktay, executive director of the Center for Coastal Studies. We have a letter from State Rep Sarah Peak and State Senator Julian Sear. We have a letter from Katie Murphy, owner operator of the Field Point Oyster Farm in Wellfleet. We have a letter from Andrew Gottlieb of APCC. We have another letter from Carl Bryvokel, former herring warden. A letter from the Mass Audubon signed by Heidi Ricci and Melissa Lowe. A letter from Beth Chapman, Board of Directors, friend of Herring River. A letter from the Wellfleet DPW Director, Jay Norton. Another letter from Helen Hooper and Philip Tabas. We have one from Dale and David Rowe of 735 and 744 Chequesset Neck Road. We have a letter from Gary Joseph, and we have a letter from Liza Cox representing CYCC. And we have one from Lara Parkin. She owns a home at 80 Way 55 and land at 90 Way 55 Wellfleet, overlooking the golf course. And last but not least, we have a letter from John Dwayne, signed on behalf of the Wellfleet Shellfish Advisory Board. So if anyone wants to hear any of those letters, I'm happy to read them into the record, but it may take me a moment to sort through and find them.
And I take it, I read those too. They were all positive, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Carol, do you want to acknowledge any letters that you got, or do you have a different way of doing it?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you just answered my question. I just wanted to clarify for the record that I believe that they were all support letters for the project.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Carol, would you like to do anything, or?
Yeah, we actually were emailed quite many letters of support, which will be in the packets for our commissioners before next week's meeting, or I'm sorry, next month's meeting.
Great. Shall we open it up for questions now?
Yes, I believe we should. We have
Okay.
a Warren Mumford.
Warren Mumford, you're on, Mr. Mumford.
Oh, hi. I'm
Hi.
representing the board of the Friends of the Cape Cod National Seashore. And I just wanted to reinforce the support that was expressed in Pete Eisenbarth's letter, the president of our board. Our mission is to support the National Seashore in their effort to preserve and protect the ecosystems within the park boundaries. And as part of that, of course, we strongly support enthusiastically this project.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Keep in mind, we're asking, okay, Mr. Safir? Safe.
Hi, I have a question that, the focus of this meeting is to determined support for this project, and I'm certainly very much in favor of it. I have a question, though, about a change that could occur that might affect planning, and that's the slow opening of the Duck Harbor Inlet. Is there some plan about what to do about that, if there is something to do about that, or is because it would potentially down the road, obviously not soon, affect the water quality of this basin?
Is there anyone that can speak to that?
Carol.
Yes, thank you. So actually, the restoration will sort of improve the situation in that by opening up the Chequesset Neck dike, there will be better drainage out of that Duck Harbor area. So when an overwash occurs, there will be a quicker natural response to lowering water levels because they'll have the ability to drain out through the dike. We also can say that the mitigation measures that have been designed, we believe will still, are adequate to address any overwash conditions in that area.
Thank you.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yes. Hi, good evening, everyone. I just first say thank you to everyone on both commissions for this evening, and also the site visit we had earlier today here at the club. The club is enthusiastically behind this project, and just wanted to reiterate, we will do everything that we can to be a very supportive partner in all of this. And again, I can't thank the efforts of Carol Ridley and certainly the Wellfleet Conservation and Truro Conservation as we've been trying to pull this together for many years. So just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that the club was extremely appreciative of everybody's efforts, and will continue to be a good partner along the way.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else that would like to ask a question? Thomas Bowe?
Yes, hi. First of all, I'd like to say, Carol, that was a tremendous presentation. Thank you so much. The homework was certainly done. And I live in Truro, not affected by this, other than the fact that I play golf at Chequesset. And is there a ballpark timeframe of when this is going to start on phase one?
Thank you. Yes, so the current schedule that we're planning with is for construction to begin at the end of this calendar year on the Chequesset Neck Road Bridge structure. That would start at the end of calendar year 2022, and approximately a year later, so at the end of 2023, construction at the golf course would commence, and that is going to provide a source of fill for to be used to elevate some of the low road segments. So the low road work would start sometime probably in the February of 24 timeframe. So that is our working timeline. Obviously, we're still working through our permitting, which we're hoping to conclude fairly soon, and still awaiting final word on funding, which we are working very closely with a number of different agencies on that. So that's our working timeline at this point.
Thank you.
I'm looking around, Leon, I don't see any other hands up.
Nope. Martha Craig just raised her hand. Martha?
Thank you. Sorry about the lighting.
You have a halo.
I'll try and fix that. So I did submit a letter on behalf of Friends of Herring River, which I'm not going to read because that's in for the record. But what I would like to say is I'd like to acknowledge that the vision that the founding board members had, including the late Don Palladino and the late Barbara Gray, among others, who not only cared about the environment in this project, but cared about Wellfleet very deeply. And this project will be good for Wellfleet on so many different fronts. But also, if the commission would allow, I've been asked by Tatiana Miller to read a letter that they submitted, because I know it was submitted late, and she felt that it was important to hear as one of the very few private property owners who are affected by this project and who we are working closely with. And just to summarize, if I may, if that's okay.
Please do.
Okay, so dear commission members, and I'll try and paraphrase, but she writes, being property owners within the Cape Cod National Seashore is one of our greatest gifts, a gift passed down from our grandparents, Harry and Elaine 11, and for which 4 generations of our family treasures. As property owners, we recognize that we are granted certain rights to use our property and understand that there are restrictions. We do not own the land, only the right to use it. We think of ourselves as stewards of the land, and we are privileged to live on it and wish with all our being to tread lightly, live respectfully, and honor the great beauty, and do our best to support environmental health and conservation of it. We were elated on first learning of the Herring River Restoration Project, and at each stage have been unwavering in our support. We have not wished to engage in public discourse, nor to be lobbied by those who oppose the project. And so, and I'll just recap, because that is true, they have not really engaged. My brother and I grew up learning about the history of our property, which is a pretty amazing piece. The artist studio, which had once been an ice house, positioned on the water's edge of Duck Harbor. So they're right on the edge of everything that's happening at Duck Harbor. We learned about the dike being built and what was supposed to accomplish for mosquito control and more. Our grandparents' collection of miniature ducks, a tribute to Duck Harbor, still sits on the mantle of the old Cape Central fireplace in our main house. So that's the old ice house. Our grandfather, Harry Levin, who was buried with his wife Elena in Pleasant Hill Cemetery, used to say he liked the idea of one day being underwater there. Nothing is forever. The earth is ever changing. We would hear grown-ups talk about how the idea of removing the dike would come up now and then in conversations, and that this would restore the natural landscape to what it had been. Duck Harbor would once more be a salt marsh, and we hope it will happen in our parents' lifetime. As one of the few parcels of property impacted by phase 1 of the Herring River restoration, for which a permit was applied, we declare our support for the Herring River Restoration Project and ask that the community respect science, scientists, and this earth by refraining from interfering with the monumental moment in Cape Cod's history. We will miss the blueberry bushes and microhabitats we have once come to know intimately our whole lives, but we have also seen them change in our whole lives. Pitch pines growing up, thickets growing in, open space no longer open. One of the signature characteristics of the Cape is how it is consistently changing. We accept that. We will be nostalgic for the past, and we will embrace the future. Hopefully one in which humans do not further contribute to its environmental degradation. Respectfully, Tatiana Fredrickson Miller, together with Carl Fredrickson, co-owners at 695 Bombrook Island Road. And thank you for allowing me to convey their sentiment here.
Okay, Leon, did we lose you? While we wait for Leon to
I'm here.
rejoin
I'm
us.
here.
Oh, you're here.
Yeah, I was just
Okay,
talking in the
sorry.
dark.
That's okay. I had a request to read the letter from State Senator Sear and State Rep Peak, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Okay, dear commissioners, we write to express our strong support for the Herring River Restoration Project in Wellfleet and Truro as you open the public hearing for the notices of intent. This project represents a significant opportunity to restore an extensive salt marsh ecosystem and reclaim important ecological and economic benefits for our region. The applications before you will restore tidal flow to 570 acres of native tidal wetlands using a rigorous adaptive management approach. Restoration of tidal flow to the estuary will advance the interests of the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act and improve the natural capacity of wetlands that have been degraded due to more than a century of tidal restriction. Healthy salt marshes and other forms of estuarine wetlands provide critical habitat for a wide variety of birds and wildlife and serve as nurseries for fish and shellfish. Estuarine habitats are more resilient to coastal flooding and help to filter nutrients and other pollutants from runoff and rainfall before they enter the estuary. Healthy tidal marshes also play a key role in combating climate change. Preliminary estimates based on current science indicate that restoration of salt marsh in the Herring River would result in a substantial reduction in the net volume of greenhouse gases released to the atmosphere. This includes the avoidance of methane emissions, which is more potent than carbon dioxide as a heat trapping gas in the atmosphere. A collaboration of local, state, and federal partners has been central to the project's success. This partnership has enabled the project to benefit from vast technical knowledge and experience while ensuring that decisions about project design and implementation remain local and responsive to community needs. The Herring River restoration embodies the goals of resiliency, stewardship, and partnership that are vital to our regions and the Commonwealth's future. We look forward to working with the town of Wellfleet, Cape Cod National Seashore, and other project partners to ensure the success of the project. Thank you for your consideration of these comments. Sincerely, Sarah Peak and Julian Steer.
Thank you, Hillary.
You're welcome.
Okay, Jean, that's the name I'm seeing. All right, go ahead, you've got it. You're muted, sir.
Now, can I be heard?
You can be heard.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, my name is Joe. My wife's name is Jean. I'm using the wrong laptop, but my last name is Burke, and full disclosure, we own property just off Pole Dyke Road. So my question is, I noted in Carol's presentation, which by the way was pretty thorough based on the reading that I'd done on this project. So congratulations, I understood almost all of it. That there were bullets that referred to quality of groundwater. And so I don't know if those bullets are related to this question or not. And if they are, she perhaps can tie them back to that. But what happens if after we've done the phase 1 flooding, we find out there's saltwater incursion in the aquifer?
Carol, go ahead.
Thank you. So there's been extensive study of this, and there are documents in the appendices to the notice of intent that will demonstrate that that's not likely to happen or expected to happen based on vast, extensive science dealing with tidal influence and groundwater. But beyond that, the project working with Hillary Lemos and her department has supported baseline testing for any wells that are within a close distance of the restoration area, so that if you do have a question about that and want to have a measure before restoration happens, you can have that measure taken, and then it can be compared with conditions post restoration. But the folks who would conservatively be considered to be in that position have been identified and reached out to. So if you haven't received that letter, I think that the estimation is that your well would not be in a position of even being close to having that condition. So so we're confident that there is not going to be an issue here, and but out of an abundance of caution and to address any potential concerns, this baseline testing option is available.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Catherine Myers. Catherine?
Sorry, hi, I was on mute, sorry. Yeah, I was wondering, I understand there's $62 million in funding needed. I just wanted to make sure that can the project start without the full $62 million in place? And I know you tried to answer that, Martha, I just didn't quite understand the answer, so I apologize. I mean, Carol, sorry.
Go ahead, Carol. Go ahead, Carol.
The answer is yes. The 62 million is a figure that applies to a wide range of implementation costs over 5 years. And It is anticipated that the project would not be constructed all at once. As I noted, the first project element to be constructed would be the end of this calendar year, and that would be the bridge itself. So yes, the answer is yes to your question.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you again, Carol. Sarah Fleming?
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah Fleming. I'm with Ducks Unlimited. I'm the Director of Conservation Programs for our Northeast region. And I have already submitted a letter in support of the project, but I did want to make a formal statement just acknowledging our full support of this particular project. Full disclosure for everyone, we have a financial investment into this project. We have secured $2 million in cooperation with several partners on this call, as well as the National Park Service, to help with the vegetative management that is one of the components of this project. And we are very much excited to be implementing this particular grant moving forward over the summer and over the next 2 to 3 years. But we are a 501c3 organization. And our primary mission is to conserve, restore, and manage wetland habitat. And of course, these habitats, as we know, will benefit waterfowl, but there are also significant benefits to other wildlife and to people. We have over 5,000 members in the state of Mass and have conserved over 2,500 acres of wetland habitat in the state itself. We have actually restored over 1 million acres throughout North America. So we definitely have a good stronghold on the critical importance of habitat. And I would just like to, again, formally acknowledge our full support of this particular project. We see this project aligning directly with our mission, as well as that of many of our partners, such as the Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as the state, helping to make sure we're delivering a lot of our critical coastal strategic plans, as well as aligning with many of our critical climate change actions that are moving forward. To ensure we're prepared for sea level rise and other benefits of wetland restoration. As I said, the new bridge will allow for the return of a natural flow into the system that has been currently restricted. It'll help improve both critical ecology, economics, and social benefit to the system, and reestablishment of the estuary back to native salt marsh and brackish habitat is also going to benefit numerous critical threatened endangered species, such as alewife, as well as the salt marsh sparrow. So again, we are fully in support of this project, and I have submitted a formal letter with the package, but just wanted to get on record verbally to say thank you for considering this project, and we very much look forward to moving it forward.
Thank you, Sarah. Martha, do you have something you'd like to say?
Thank you. Yes, through the chair, I would just like to confirm what Carol Ridley said about the groundwater and the wells, and I don't know if Joe Burke is still on the meeting, but I would like to offer to anybody who has questions about their wells to contact Friends of Herring River, because we have worked with a lot of property owners to address this very question. And if they have concern, Carol's right, if he hasn't been contacted, there should be no concern about the well, but it's often comforting to be able to walk through the process and to understand that and to see how the project came to that conclusion. So I would just urge anybody, and especially Joe Burke, to get in touch with Friends of Herring River, and we can set something up and go through and talk about the wells anytime they'd care to.
Thank you. Okay, I see. Oh, Mr. Carlstrom.
Thank you. And again, through the chair, just to expand a little bit on how the progress is proceeding. As a component of that $62 million, the Seashores secured funding to remove the 2 abandoned homes within the Herring River watershed. And the kickoff meeting for the construction documents for those actually happened today. So a lot of things are happening, and there's many small parts that all add up to that grand total of 62 million. And we are working on them continuously to keep this all advancing. So that's one other small aspect of this that folks will start seeing some actual work happening on the ground relative to this. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Mr. Peabody, good evening. Press your space bar. That'll do it.
How about now?
You're on.
Okay, good, thank you. I'll be surprisingly brief. My name is Gordon Peabody. I was the original chair of the first committee that was put together to study all the technical data on the Herring River. This is years ago. I tried figuring back how long ago it was, but it was a very long time ago. We had a committee with everybody that had a desk and a pen that was a government official, state, federal, local, county. And I didn't mean you, Hillary, and but Hillary was there. To make a long story short, we were asked to take a really good look at things and figure out what could happen. And a couple of things that we came to focus on at the core of our concerns were this river is not happy. It's killing its fish, it's dissolving its shellfish, it's introducing bacteria into commercial areas. And the first point is that the river is not good. Second point was doing anything is better than doing nothing. But the third point was, if we're going to do something, it should be really slow, kind of like the pace of an old dog crossing the dunes. Just take it nice and easy. Nobody's in the fire department here. And then finally, to make sure with typical micromanagement that comes from a bunch of scientists sitting around a table, to make sure that we have a monitoring and management program to make sure that it's done safely. So basically, something that seemed like a great idea 100 years ago turned out maybe not so great. And now we've been mute witnesses to this river that has been strangled to the point where it lost its voice. Perhaps the greatest challenge in life that we face, my opinion, is that we can make a difference. Yet somehow the people on the Cape of all different persuasions, even people that originally didn't like this idea, came together and they began generating a spark that they passed between them that now has really caught fire. And I believe that as this river finds its voice again, that the burden of our efforts will become weightless, and this river will find its voice again. Thank you.
Beautifully put. Any other questions or comments? If not, I think we've just about, we're close to the 2-hour period. And if I don't see more questions, I'll go to move that we adjourn. I move that we adjourn.
Second, Michael.
All right, I'll go through. How are we going to coordinate this, Carol?
Yeah, before you adjourn, Leon, we should continue, both commissions should continue this to a date certain. So I'm going to suggest that in Wellfleet, we continue this to our May 4th hearing. We have a choice between May 4th and April 20th. Those are regularly scheduled hearings. On our April 20th hearing, so far we have 6 items. And on our May 4th hearing, we have 4. So that's why I would suggest May 4th. So folks can continue to review the material and consider the presentation tonight, if that is agreeable to the applicant to go out as far as May 4th.
How's that sound, Carol?
I believe that sounds workable. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I have a motion and a second. I'll ask my people if they want to adjourn. Marty, how about you?
Okay.
Yes.
No, to continue, Leon. We have to vote to continue.
Oh, I see.
first.
Right. We'll continue this issue until May, would you say 2nd?
4th.
4th. Okay, May 4th. All right. I move that we continue this until May 4th, where we'll vote. Do I have a second?
Second, Michael.
Okay. So John Kumbler, how do you vote? And John's not here right now. Barbara Brennisell, how do you vote?
Yes.
Michael Fisher?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
I vote yes. And Ben, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay, and John, are you with us? Looks like
John
John dropped.
Cumberland. I think we lost John Cumberland.
I think we lost John Cumberland, but we still have a quorum, so
Yes.
we have continued this for Wellfleet Conservation Commission.
Okay.
All
All
right.
right. Well, next up for Truro Conservation Commission, I would just like to say thank you so much to everyone for the fantastic site visit we had today. It was really great, and everyone just did a fantastic job, made it so clear to us what was happening. Although Wellfleet's having the bulk of this project, it was really impressive. I can't say enough about it. On behalf of us, thanks again. So Truro, I need a motion to continue this hearing to May 2nd at 5 p.m.
So moved.
Bob White,
I'll second.
second. Linda Nunes Rose. I'll need a roll call. Linda Nunes Rose,
Here, yes.
Bob White,
Yes.
Diane Messenger. I think she
She's,
said yes.
doesn't have sound yet.
She's muted there. Mark Adams,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. This will be continued May 2nd, 5 p.m.
okay.
All right.
Now, Leon, you can move to adjourn.
Can I really? Okay.
Really,
Really? I think we already voted, actually. No, we did. Barbara, how do you vote to adjourn?
Yeah, yes, yes.
Okay, you sure? Michael Fisher,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
and I vote yes. And Ben Fairbank?
Yes.
Okay, and John, are you with us? Nope, he's not. He fell off the edge of the world. Okay, at this point, we are adjourned. And thank you, everybody, for your participation and interest. And
Truro
the,
needs to adjourn as well.
Mhm.
And the site visits were wonderful this morning. It was
Yeah.
great.
Very much.
Great.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank
Hold
you.
on, Leon, because Truro has to
Oh, I'm
formally.
sorry. I'm sorry.
That's
Truro Commissioners, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Bob White, second.
I'll second it.
Linda Nunes Rose, Linda Nunes, roll call, Linda Nunes Rose,
Yes.
Bob White,
Yes.
Diane Messenger,
Yes.
Mark Adams,
Yes.
and I vote yes.
Where's Larry?
He went off a little bit ago.
Okay,
Okay,
all
well,
right.
thank you, Carol. And sorry
Thank you
for,
all very much.
Thank you all very much for your
Thank
time.
you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
good night.
Great job.